as I watch what's going on in the Middle East right now,
we definitely are on the verge of the high probability of major war in the Middle East.
The Pentagon has deployed the 5-ship USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Strike Group to the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It joins the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, which arrived in the region early last week.
They are big, fat, sitting targets against the modern weapon.
But if there is an escalation and missiles start to fire,
shut down, and it will be yet another huge embarrassment for American technology and American military industrial complex. Iran can literally blow every single American base in the Middle East as retaliation. It's already happening, but it will accelerate the emergence of a completely new configuration of forces in the Middle East.
And our guest today is Andrei Martyánov. Hello, everyone. This is the New Rules Podcast, and I'm your host, Dimitri Simes Jr. Today is October 23rd, and the world is still on the brink of World War III. Israel has so far delayed its much-anticipated land offensive into Gaza, but our expectation is that it will begin sooner rather than later. In fact, by the time you're watching this video, it may very well be underway. What can we expect from the escalation of this crisis? And what are the potential consequences for Israel, Palestine, the region, and the United States? To discuss these questions with us, we're very pleased to welcome Andrei Martyánov, a military and geopolitical analyst. Andrei, thank you so much for joining the program.
My pleasure to be with you, Dmitry.
Andrei, as I watch what's going on in the Middle East right now, it seems as though we're in our equivalent of July 1914, when all the European powers slowly but surely moved towards World War I. How close are we to a major war in the Middle East, in your view?
I agree with your analogy, actually, yes. Nobody wanted the war, but it happened anyway. Initially, I think the analogy, why it is correct, because even Iran and other forces which even support Hamas, they do not really want any kind of serious conflagration there. But I think so there are chances, of course. And if before that it was low probability, we definitely are on the verge of the high probability of major war in the Middle East. But a lot depends actually, of course, on the behavior of Israel itself and how the ground offensive, as they call it, a ground operation, will proceed, if it proceeds really at all. Obviously, the United States tries to prevent it right now because it inserted itself as, yet again, the main arbiter. But judging by the forces which they moved into the Eastern Mediterranean, it is just to keep Hezbollah in check. But again, Iran, I would say, for all Iran's support, well, obviously Hezbollah is part of Iranian external forces, so to speak. But in terms of Hamas, I don't think so. Iran is really inclined to go for that. But I mean, they would expect probably some kind of the false flag, and they're ready, I think.
And you alluded to the moves being made by the United States. So I just want to go deeper for our audience members. The United States has deployed 2 aircraft carriers to the eastern Mediterranean, which, according to some estimates, can carry up to 135 combat aircraft. The United States has also announced that they're sending thousands of Marines to the Middle East. So my question is this: how does this naval/military buildup affect the dynamic in the Middle East? What is it aimed at achieving?
First, a deterrent for Iran and Hezbollah. And secondly, in case of their possible, who knows, I mean, again, probability is higher, of course, today, of their two-front, so to speak, war for Israel, obviously to make sure that Hezbollah is bombed, and they will interdict Hezbollah lines of communications. So that's the main point. 2,000 Marines which are there are just very symbolic. They wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. So, but it is primarily air power on the aircraft carriers, which, you have in mind to keep Hezbollah in check. At least they think they can. I don't think so they can, but who knows, whatever is the situation there right now.
And most of our audience members are not military experts, and they're particularly not necessarily familiar with naval weaponry. Could you explain a little bit about the aircraft carriers that the United States has sent to the Eastern Mediterranean and what these systems are capable of?
Well, primarily, these are the Nimitz class. I mean, the Gerald Ford and the Eisenhower. These are nuclear-powered, very large ships. I mean, beautiful ships, actually, with very large displacement, more than 100,000 tons. Each of them are capable of carrying up to 90 combat aircraft. I mean, not all of those combat aircraft, of course, are just, like F-18 Super Hornets. There are many aircraft which work in the auxiliary or supporting role, such as some of them are used as refuelers. They refuel combat aircraft from the deck, which are launched from the deck. And of course, we have the early warning and radar picket, so to speak, aircraft, such as Hawkeye. So there are many of other supporting aircraft, but primarily they can always form their strike core, so to speak, which will be up to probably 60. It depends, it all depends on the configuration, but they certainly can carry each of them up to 60 F-18 Hornets strike. They are FA, which is mean fighter and attack, which are capable of work on ground targets. I think so they're getting now those F-35s too. So, well, I would say I would pick F-18 over F-35 any given day, but point is they are primarily designed to work on the ground targets. They certainly are capable of doing basically air patrols and defend the fleet, but primarily, as experience shows, they are great and main tool of America's power projection into globally around the world. I mean, in the different areas of the world, but they are, how to put it politely, they are white elephants, so to speak, of the bygone era now, but they certainly could be effective and could serve as deterrent against such force as Hezbollah.
You said they're white elephants. Why is that?
Well, because they're, in terms of their real power projections, they are big, fat, sitting targets against the modern weaponry, such as anti-shipping missiles and hypersonic missiles. So in this respect, they are not a real asset, or rather liability, against any major power. And of course, by major powers, we mean two, either China or Russia, especially Russia with its variety of hypersonic weapons of extremely long range. So in this particular case, those aircraft carriers and their carrier battle group, which usually comprises 2 or 3 Aegis carrying destroyers, they are not really any more serious military asset, except for their fear factor that of doing some stupid thing. They could be sunk or basically disabled, and that's pretty much it. In terms of, for example, like for the mission which they have now in the East Mediterranean, they certainly could be useful. But of course, for the price, my gosh, you're looking at Gerald Ford, something like $13 billion, plus add here the air wing, which probably is another $5-6 billion. And I'm talking about airplanes. So you have a single weapon, a single carrier, single ship, which carries on itself almost $20 billion worth of military assets and could be taken out by 2-3 missiles such as Zircon or Kinjal. can you imagine the impact, apart from the fact of them having a very serious cultural and mental influence within the United States? The loss of a single ship can escalate actually in the real war to nuclear threshold because of the political, emotional, cultural, and of course military impact of such a loss. So don't forget, you have also more than 6,000 people on board of this carrier. That is why it has with itself usually what is called carrier battle group. It has 1 or 2 Virginia class submarines which escort the carrier battle group. As I already stated, it has the 2 to 3 destroyers, depending on the circumstances. It could be probably up to 4. It has all kinds of the supply ships, and so it's a pretty cumbersome operation, to put it mildly. But yes, in nowadays with the modern technology, it's practically defenseless.
You mentioned that it's sitting ducks for major powers like Russia and China. But if there is an escalation and missiles start to fire, the missiles will probably come from Hezbollah or Iran. Do you think that either of those actors would have the means to sink one of these aircraft carriers or not?
Yeah, you don't, for Hezbollah, God forbid, of course, we won't even go there. But of course, for Hezbollah may have access. I'm not 100% positive, so don't quote me on that. But Syria has Russian made what is called Onyx P-800. Its expert version is called Yahunt, anti-shipping missiles. They're not hypersonic, but they are high supersonic. They can reach up to Mach 3 at the terminal. And per the regime of the limiting of the range of those missiles, they have a range of 300 kilometers. So that means carriers cannot come closer to 300 kilometers to any shore because there will be basically the danger of being hit. Onyx is a very serious missile. And of course, Hezbollah operates all kinds of other missiles there. And so they are not obviously 100% proof from any kind of the attack by non-state actor. But I'm sure U.S. Navy is fully aware of this situation, and they will stay away as much as possible, and they can seek actually out those who can operate these weapons.
It's very interesting that you brought up Syria, because I remember about 2 weeks back, a major Israeli newspaper reported that the Israelis, along with the Americans, had threatened Hezbollah privately that if Hezbollah were to join the conflict, then the U.S. and Israel would try and target Syria, in particular, President Bashar al-Assad personally. Based on what you're telling us, it seems that if they were to go through with that threat, then Syria could potentially respond in a very serious way as well.
Yes, certainly Syria has... how to put it? She has a serious combat experience, obviously fighting ISIS and all those groups which were supported and are supported by the United States. And Syria has some means which can be very dangerous for the United States. But you have to keep in mind that those threats about Bashar al-Assad and attacking Syria, you have Tartus naval base of Russian Navy there, which is what is known as 5 operational squadron, and you have, of course, air base in Khmeimim, which is stuffed with air defense systems, and of course it has the serious air wing there, which has both Su-35s, Su-30SMs, and Su-34s. And it also is capable of basically getting the type of AVAX planes there, and including the strategic bombers such as Tu-22 M3. So it's a very serious situation in this respect. So they might threaten in private, but they know that if something goes up in Syria, there could be, Israel will basically be done pretty much for good. And So in this particular respect, I would say it was mostly intimidation, and especially talking about the legitimate leader of the state. So, and in this case, that all bets will be off. And again, Arab world today is dramatically different from the Arab world of the 20 years ago. So, and that has to be considered.
It's worth noting that Syria is not the only target destination, so to speak. As the conflict continues to escalate, there's a growing number of people in Washington who are calling for the U.S. to attack Iran. For example, here is what Senator Lindsey Graham said on Sunday. Let's play the clip.
We're here today to tell Iran we're watching you. If this war grows, it's coming to your backyard.
So my question, Andrei, to you is this. Is the United States ready for war with Iran?
No, not at all. Lindsey Graham is a blowhard. He is basically a certified war criminal. There's no war Lindsey Graham doesn't like, and he was the guy directly involved in supporting, actually, on his part, for ISIS and Al-Qaeda type groups, and he was actually there with them. So, I mean, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He does it for the benefit of the first Israeli lobby, obviously, on which he is very dependent in Senate, and obviously to placate basically people who elect him consistently, despite the fact that he definitely has some serious actually mental issue. He is emotionally unstable man, and he was calling for bombing pretty much as Babylon B. Was laughing at him making his statement that obviously it was fake, but it was pretty much on point. He said, let's bomb the whole world. Lindsey Graham doesn't understand that the United States is not capable to fight any kind of the serious ground operation at all. The only thing they can do is to threaten, and they know if they go in terms of, I mean, again, what can you do? You can send some, tomahawks there. Well, guess what? The answer will be, Iran is not even Syria. Iran is a serious regional power with actually quite significant military potential. And it has some high-tech weapons, including extremely advanced air defense. And so United States, obviously those statements are primarily made for public and for the benefit of Israel too. But Israel also threatens Iran, but it's empty threats, because Israel cannot conduct ground operation against Iran, and even if it could, it would be decimated. But don't forget, there are 1,200 kilometers separating Israel and Iran. Neither side can actually provide serious deployment of the forces to fight real war, real combined arms. So what's left is primarily air operations, and even this on part of Israel will require direct interference and support from the United States, because you, as already stated, 1,200 kilometers, you have to fly it over the territory of, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. So good luck getting the permission to do that. Or you can try to circumnavigate it, but then you have to refuel them nonstop, and that's where the United States comes in. So, and that's what we have. It is primarily PR. Reality, of course, is very different. And then people forget, Iran has not only good air defense, they have a pretty outstanding variety of all kinds of the operational, tactical, and operational ballistic missiles. And those are not Katyusha missiles. Those are very serious, highly sophisticated, with great targeting missiles, as United States experienced in 2020, when Donald Trump ordered, absolutely irresponsible assassination of General Soleimani. And then you had those Iran retaliated at American bases in the Middle East. Iran can literally blow every single American base in the Middle East as retaliation. So we have this dynamics in there, and that's why, for the most part, those are pathos-ridden, statements, to chest thumping, and plus always consider the fact that indeed it's not a stretch. Lindsey Graham, he is a neocon, and he's mentally unstable man.
So would it be fair to say that if the Israelis and the Americans were to lob Tomahawk missiles and other cruise missiles at Iran, then Iran would be able to deliver an asymmetrical response?
Oh, no, Iran will be able to deliver both asymmetrical and very symmetrical. The Tel Aviv and Jerusalem would be burning. That's the point. Iran has, vast number of highly sophisticated, highly developed ballistic missiles. And now they have, as they claim, I cannot verify it one way or another. But, I would expect from Iran, they have the hypersonic missiles. And they have a vast number of the cruise missiles. So you will have their, as I already stated, their response will be not just asymmetrical. It will be very symmetrical, and every single air base, military base of the United States in the Middle East will be under attack.
Returning to your point about air defenses, I can't help but recall that one of the systems that the Iranians have is the S-300, which is currently in use both by Russia and Ukraine in the conflict. And that system has actually shown itself to be pretty well, better than Western systems. So it's no bluff when you say that they have a very strong air defense network. The S-300 has recently been tested in Ukraine, and it has shown itself to be a pretty formidable system.
Iran has Russian-made S-300 PMU favorite systems primarily deployed around Bushehr nuclear station, where they're obviously building the nuclear station. And of course, there is a pretty large number of Russian, basically specialists working there. But what should not be forgotten, and that's another thing, Iran is one of, let's count, United States, Russia, China, European, France primarily. So Iran is one of the 5 entities in the world capable and is producing their own long-range air defense systems. It has just, enormous amount of we can say it's knockoffs of Russian air defense systems, but some of them are actually long-range systems by Iran, are actually indigenous. And that's the thing which have to be considered. It's not just S-300s. There are other systems of Iranian origins which may be not as good as 300 PMU, but they're good enough to create a lot of headache for any type of the force which will decide stupidly to attack it.
But Andrei, how is this even possible? After all, all of these sort of smart policy people in Washington, D.C. have spent decades carefully crafting sanctions policy against Iran to make sure that Iran's economy stalls, to make sure that its military industrial progress comes to a halt. How is it possible that Iran has all these dangerous weapons when all the smart people in Washington, D.C. have been, producing sanctions against them for at least 4 decades?
Well, the statement about smart people in Washington has to be, of course, investigated thoroughly. I don't think so there are many smart people there to start with. In fact, I am on the record and I'm writing the 4th book. The competence, the decline of the intellectual level of Washington elites, so to speak, is precipitous. It's just unbelievable. Russians openly laugh at them now, and they call them all kinds of names, which are ranging from buffoons to which is true. Plus, do not forget that one of the most stunning features of Iran, which many people don't know, that actually Iran in its constitution calls itself scientific state. They built their state based on science. That comes isn't it, contrary to what usually people perceive about Iran. But Iran has an enormous surplus of the mathematicians, physics, and engineering cadres. They are very capable people, and don't forget that they have access to some of the best military technology in Russia, which increasingly Russia and Iran coordinate their basically actions in many respects, including military, political, and military technological respects. Then, of course, they have the access to China, and they have access to North Korea. And North Korea is the kind of middleman, so to speak, and which can basically juggle all kinds of the supplies which are needed. So there you go. And they certainly have their very capable people there. I mean, definitely. They at least are capable to not reverse engineer, but copy many things and actually improve on them. And there you go. And suddenly you have this situation.
Yeah, I remember seeing a statistic, in recent days. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the graph showed that the United States and Iran have exactly the same number of yearly engineering graduates. I was totally blown away by that.
Yeah, it's Iran, again, there are many Iranians starting from the 90s who studied in Russia. So, and I know this firsthand. So, yeah, those guys love their physics, mathematics, and engineering. That's for sure. I mean, no matter how one can look at the issue of the Iran being allegedly theocracy, it's more nuanced than that, obviously. But, I mean, what can I say? Yeah, they are a fairly advanced country with a fairly advanced industry still.
I mean, I think it's worth noting that the U.S. moves to escalate the conflict could potentially lead to a blown-out confrontation, not just with Iran, but with other powers. During his visit to Beijing last week, Putin announced that he ordered MiG-31 aircraft armed with Kinzhal missiles to begin round-the-clock patrols over the Black Sea. Let's play a clip of what he said.
Хочу сказать, это не угроза, то, что я сейчас скажу, и о чем вас проинформирую. Но по моему поручению военно-воздушные силы, военно-космические силы России начинают на постоянной основе патрулирование в нейтральной зоне воздушного пространства над Черным морем. И наши самолеты МиГ-31 вооружены комплексами «Кинжал».
And so my question to you, Andrei, is what does this move mean in practice, and how do you think it will affect the military dynamic in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Well, it's a deterrent factor. Obviously, Kinzhal is capable it has the range of 2,000 plus kilometers. It is uninterceptable, and Kinzhal proved itself dramatically in a special military operation. And, well, as we all know, Patriot Pack 3 didn't like it because it was annihilated by Kinzhal and hasn't been able to even process the targeting data. And they were launching, whatever they were seeing there. But it didn't help. So the same goes for air defense of the carrier battle group. As Vladimir Putin himself stated, it was primarily a response to the deployment of the aircraft carriers in the Eastern Mediterranean, because Russians obviously don't like to see any kind of the aircraft being launched and, flying towards the Black Sea. So that's one of the things, deterrent factor. Plus, do not forget, United States is completely on board 24/7 with ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, be them the space assets or whatever other signal intelligence assets. They are provided to armed forces of Ukraine and to Ukraine in general. So they know, they can see MiG-31s starting, taking off. And they always try to warn Ukraine. Well, once you have MiG-31 patrolling, that means being already airborne and already patrolling with the speeds which they can accelerate really fast to launch Kinzhal, suddenly you also have not only the carrier battle groups with the target drone on their backs, or flight decks rather, but you have the capability to radically shorten the time between the launch and hitting the target in Ukraine. And that means that Russians see what Ukraine does. And if you have MiG-31 in air, you can attack, for example, and just to give you example, 1,200 kilometers Kinzhal covers in less than 6 minutes. Can you imagine this? So if you have the distances to the battlefield or targets within Ukraine, you kind of, reduce this distance dramatically 2 times. So you have about 3 minutes from the moment of launch and Kinzhal hits the target. Well, good luck trying to launch any kind of, for example, aircraft, which whatever is remaining in Ukraine, especially Su-24s, which are basically modernized to carry the Storm Shadow Scalp missiles, then you will not have time even to just run away pretty much. And that's also the second benefit for Russians to patrol this in this manner. And it's kind of, killing 2 birds with 1 shot.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's clear that this would limit Ukraine's ability to strike against Russia, to be prepared for Russian strikes. But could you elaborate a little bit more about the first point when it comes to deterring U.S. aircraft carriers in the Eastern Mediterranean? How exactly does Putin's move help Russia do that?
Well, people in the United States Navy, they obviously are not totally ignorant, unlike it is the case with the Washington, D.C. And they know what type of weapon system they look at. And if the deterrence is not to tell your opponent not to do stupid things, because the moment the first batch of aircraft is launched from the carrier deck and they take course towards Russia and cross, for example, Bosphorus and then enter the Black Sea airspace, the Black Sea airspace, in any significant numbers, which would indicate the preparation for the strike, the aircraft carrier will be hit. It's just to show that don't do this. Whatever they do now in relation to Israel, it's obviously between the United States and Israel and Hamas, of course. But other than that, I mean, Russia sits, calmly there, just shows that, it's like showing the gun to the guy who comes with a knife to rob you, okay? This is pretty much what it is.
Makes sense. And, since we started talking about the Ukraine conflict, I want to shift a little bit in that direction, because it's almost inevitable that people are going to compare the Israel-Hamas war with the Ukraine conflict, just because those are the 2 major armed conflicts going on right now. In your view, what are the similarities and differences between these 2 conflicts? How reasonable is it to compare them?
No, absolutely not reasonable. There is nothing in common in terms of, keep this in mind. Special military operation is happening right now at the front line, which is more than 1,000 kilometers long. It's 700 miles. And we have the forces and the scale of forces there, which are, even NATO, as General Cavoli stated in January, scale. Those are full-blown combined arms operations and multi-domain operations. In the case of Israel, do not forget that Gaza Strip is merely 145 miles of area, square miles of area. It's literally nothing. I mean, it's about the size, if you look at it, it's about the size of Moscow, probably even smaller than that. So you have this kind of area, which is primarily urban, like Gaza City, urban environment, and you have on one side basically a guerrilla force, the force which has only fairly light arms. No, we're not talking about those Katyusha rockets on those, but primarily light arms and some ability to launch drones and things of this nature. And on the other hand, you have a very vastly superior numerically and technologically in Israeli defense force. So there is very little in common in this respect. And Israeli force actually is in such position that it already did, basically, again, it's blocked any kind of the access to the Gaza Strip. So they are just thinking now and counting how many casualties they will sustain when going into the Gaza Strip, trying to fight Hamas. And I think so that that's a very different story, really. I mean, there is some urban combat, for example, obviously in special military operations, and Russians were taking cities such as Mariupol, and you have other type of the basically a large kind of settlements. But that's about it. It's a really different kind of the conflict. And yeah, the Israelis themselves told that it's going to last for 3 months. We'll see, so.
Yeah, I mean, because that's roughly the same amount of time that the Battle of Mariupol and Bakhmut took. But I can't help but remember that, for example, in the Battle of Mariupol, you had some of the most experienced and elite units of the Donetsk People's Militia, Sparta Battalion, Somali, Vostok, units that have been fighting since 2014 and really were on the cutting edge of military science. Then you move over to Bakhmut, Artyomovsk. You also had troops there who had previously fought in Syria, in Libya, in Africa. So they also had plenty of experience fighting in cutting-edge conditions. Do you expect the same level of competence from Israeli forces? Because the last time you were on the program, you noted that when you look at NATO militaries, none of them are as prepared for the realities of modern warfare as the Russian or the Ukrainian militaries are. Could the same be said about the Israeli military?
Yeah, they are not prepared for this type, especially since now they've been calling the reservists. And it's been, to put it mildly, if you remove the Israeli Air Force, which is pretty good, at what they do, not that all of what they do necessarily is legitimate, but the point is it's IDF, Israeli Defense Force at large. It has to be considered as the very well-equipped police force for the conduct of the police operations of high intensity. And that's the difference. And again, they go into the Gaza city, what they going to do? They have some units which are highly trained, highly prepared, the special forces units and things like that. But overall, the army itself, I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to go into already largely bombed out Gaza City, the streets covered in rubble, and how do you fight with the tanks? And, so it requires a serious training to do that. And I know they probably studied how Russians did it, for example, like Mariupol, which was a major city. And so I don't know, they know they will sustain serious losses there, no doubt about it. They will eventually overcome it. Obviously, they are much better equipped and much larger than Hamas. And eventually you can consider the fact that they can do it, but at what cost, at what price? And of course, we have to keep in mind Israel's internal dynamics and Bibi Netanyahu basically being right now as that proverbial cornered rat, because his basically fate is sealed one way or another, I think. And of course, we need to look after if this operation starts, the reaction of the international community and especially Arab world. And I mean, it can basically push towards it's already happening, but it will accelerate the emergence of a completely new configuration of forces in the Middle East.
You say that the Israelis probably have been studying what's been going on in the Ukraine conflict, for example, the Battle of Mariupol. But when I look at some of the things that are coming out on social media, I'm honestly not so sure, because I've seen clips, for example, of Israeli special forces walking down the streets of a city partially controlled by Hamas fighters, and they're just nonchalantly walking around with no, infantry fighting vehicles, nothing, accompanying them. There's also all these sort of pictures of Ukrainian equipment just out in the open. And a lot of Russian defense analysts have said, aren't they aware that, these are basically sitting ducks for drone attacks? So, again, to what extent is it reasonable to think that the Israeli military, which again was considered before October the 7th to be one of the best ones in the world, to what extent is it reasonable to think that these people have actually been keeping up with the news and driving any sort of conclusions from that?
I'm sure that on the level of Israel's what would amount to general staff, they definitely study. But you see, that's the issue. It is one thing to know, but it's not enough. You have to understand, and most importantly, internalize. That means what? To provide, for example, field manuals for the lower ranks to kind of, trickle down from the level of the operational strategic staffs on the level of brigades, regiments, battalions, and which would also internalize these lessons through the documents of the combat training and basically training troops. And here, yeah, absolutely. I don't think so Israeli are that proficient on this level, on the tactical level, the level of their squads, platoons, companies and things like that. Obviously, the higher level, operational level and strategic level officers certainly are aware and studied whatever they can. But yeah, it takes a long time to prepare the force, and Israeli are not. And we have to keep in mind also that basically, Israeli Defense Force mythology spurs from the 1967 and 1973. And but still, you have to always keep in mind there was a lot of propaganda to it, and there was obviously the issue of the promotion, especially in the United States, of the military capability of Israelis. There was certainly some in 60s and 70s, no doubt about it. Right now, it's a very different force. And you know what? So it's like mostly those famous photos, which of the Israeli Defense Force girls carrying, AR-15, whatever, M16, guns in the public while wearing those cute dresses and things like that. It's not the sign of any kind of the serious training, and the serious training takes, as I already stated, very many months, to put it politely.
The Israelis may have their problems, but I can't help but draw our attention back to the United States, because both Biden and Janet Yellen have recently claimed that the United States is capable of supporting proxy wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. Let's play the clip for our audience members.
Are the wars in Israel and Ukraine more than the United States can take on at the same time?
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense. We have the capacity to do this, and we have an obligation to. We are the essential nation, to paraphrase the former Secretary of State. And if we don't, who does?
And so, Andrei, this begs the question, are they right? Can the United States walk and chew gum at the same time?
No. United States is bankrupt right now. And we all know that. Anybody who has any brains left knows this. They can print more money, but the point is, what good money is when you cannot buy anything on them. And Pentagon was screaming basically that they have the reduction of their stocks to the point when it becomes actually the threat to the national security of the United States. So let's say Yellen and Biden push through this package, or let's say $100 billion, although we already know that Israel is now getting the most of it. What is this? What those money buy for Ukraine? Well, I mean, you know what? United States can send 100 more Abrams tanks. They will be burned in the field. United States can, push their European, not allies. They're not allies. They're like exploited, battered women. Now, the Europeans, they will tell them to send whatever they have in terms of the F-16s or whatever, the missiles and everything. Each time it goes there, it's blown to smithereens by Russians. And so, yeah, they can print money, but again, what good will they do? The only good they can do is the fact that, which was admitted by Yellen herself, that essentially United States has additional state, and this is Ukraine. United States pays for everything there. Actually, Ukraine, or whatever is left of it, exists today as semi-functional state only solely because of the money which are provided by the United States, which pays for their state bureaucracy, the basic bills. So militarily, it makes no difference whatsoever. And if United States wants to continue this, well, you know what? I mean, what's the deal? What's the big deal? $32 trillion in debt or whatever. But eventually, the whole thing is in such position that United States eventually will simply run out of the budget by means of the servicing the national debt. Otherwise, once it defaults, which is, of course, very scary for United States, the proposition which is scary. I mean, we already have the de-dollarization, which is, manifest now. It wasn't the case 5 years ago. But now, basically, dollar is being substituted with other currencies. And so, they can pretend whatever they want, but United States cannot do this, especially because industrially, United States lost huge share of its industrial capacity, which before have been able to produce at least some kind of the, war material, so to speak. Just to give you an example, United States cannot produce Abrams tanks anymore. It just simply can't. It has some kits, and it has some kits which was transferred to Egypt, but that's about it. The only tanks United States can give Ukraine are those from the U.S. Army stocks. And this actually repeats itself across the whole spectrum of American military-industrial complex and production, So there you go. F-35 is not coming there because it will be shut down, and it will be yet another huge embarrassment for American technology and American military industrial complex. And we have the situation, so Yellen and Biden can basically dream whatever they want, but it's not about supporting the war. It's about supporting Ukraine as a state and paying for now its bills, just to make sure that it exists long enough to kill more Russians, because basically most people in the U.S. Congress and in Biden administration simply want to kill Russians. It's the bottom line, and they don't care who they kill there.
Your point about industrial capacity is so important, because even if the United States prints more dollars, it can't print more tanks. It can't print more missiles. That's not how the economy works. But I think the other point that I found pretty stunning, there was an article from Axios over the weekend, and they interviewed former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates. And he said the reason why he's so concerned about these two crises happening on the same time is that he thinks that the White House just won't have enough bandwidth to handle it. Because according to him, there's about 8 to 10 people in the White House that handle all of the sort of national security crises that happen. And so that if there's too much going on at the same time, these people are just going to be overwhelmed. Right? Like I was just, so stunned by that, because, right, you think about geopolitics, you think about, powers, but at the end of the day, If mediocre bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. are going to be overwhelmed, the United States won't be able to properly mobilize even its existing resources.
Well, Bob Gates should know better. He was both CIA director and the Secretary of the Defense. But the point, you mentioned it, mediocrity is the highest level you can expect there. But primarily, if you look at people who come on board in Biden administration, they simply do not have actually competent people. I mean, it's so patently obvious that, for example, Anthony Blinken or Jake Sullivan, they wouldn't be allowed to mow the lawns of some oligarchs, Russian oligarchs in, who reside now in France or somewhere. So, and you have this type of people. Just to give you example, the new chief of naval operation, this lady, what's her name? She is an admiral. Guess what she has? She has a degree in journalism and in management. And she is now chief of naval operation of the United States Navy. I mean, it's bordering on the ludicrous, to have this. And again, as I already stated, the degradation of the American political class is astonishing. You literally have people who have no clue. You can see yourself from the dynamics of the special military operation, and you can see yourself that those people, the only thing they know how to do is PR. That's it. The only skill average American politician has is how to reelect him or herself. They don't have any kind of the real statehood skills, which is statesmanship skills, which allow you to manage the problems, which allow you to control things. They don't have it. Jake Sullivan is a lawyer, for crying out loud. I mean, when you look at the list of U.S. presidents and national security advisors, my God, I don't remember any good ones, And so it's just the way it is in Washington, and it will continue to roll down the hill. And as I already stated, the Congress, come on, it's not even serious. At some point of time, I was making a joke about it, but their approval ratings are hovering somewhere slightly above the approval ratings of Al-Qaeda, So, and when you look at this, how can they even deal with anything when they don't have even competences? Forget about numbers which are required to handle those crises. And American bureaucracy evidently doesn't work efficiently to start with. It is basically all kinds of the intrigues, all kinds of the framing other people. It's horrendous. It's basically the American state control and state management mechanism seized at this stage. The only thing they know, as I already stated, is how to re-elect themselves and how to print money, period. They don't know how to handle anything whatsoever.
I want to remind our audience members that you watched and listened to the New Rules podcast. I'm your host, Dmitry Simes Jr., and our guest today was Andrei Martyánov. Andrei, where can our audience members go to keep up with your work?
Basically, my blog, pardon me, it's Reminiscence of the Future. And, of course, my channel, Smoothie X12 on YouTube. Yeah, don't be confused by this name. So that's pretty much it.
And if you want to keep up with our work, the very first thing you should do is like this video and subscribe to our Rumble channel. It really helps get our message out to a broader audience. Additionally, we'll have the links to all of our social media in the description below. Thank you all for tuning in. Till next time.